A soul torn from its own time awakens at a crime scene he is forced to call his own. He finds himself in the body of Klein, a young man who apparently ended his own life with a revolver to the head. Yet, the fatal wound is impossibly healing, and a cryptic note left behind warns that everyone will die. Survival itself becomes an act of investigation, forcing him to piece together the final moments of a stranger's life while clinging to the desperate hope of returning home. His only clue to escape is a bizarre luck enhancement ritual, the very act that may have trapped him here in the first place. He meticulously gathers the ingredients, his path forward a gamble between two worlds. But as he navigates the gaslit streets, a single, familiar word spoken by a fortune-teller stops him cold: tarot. The name is a shocking link to a potential transmigration senior, a figure from this world's history who may hold the key to everything. Drawn in by this impossible connection, he accepts the offer of a free divination, stepping into the gloom of the diviner's tent. He seeks an answer to his own predicament, but is he prepared to unravel a mystery far deeper and more dangerous than just one man's death?
Free? Free things cost the most, I mumbled to myself. I had already made up my mind. Whatever additional services this fortune-teller offered, I would firmly refuse them all. If you're really that capable, go on, try divining that I transmigrated here. With that defiant thought, I stooped low and followed the woman, her face a mask of red and yellow paint, into the low-slung tent. The interior was almost pitch black, saved only by a few weak beams of light that managed to pierce the canvas. In the gloom, I could faintly make out a table covered with what looked like paper cards. The woman in the pointy hat, however, seemed utterly unaffected by the darkness. Her long black dress glided as if moving over water as she circled the table, sat down opposite me, and lit a single candle. The dim yellow flame flickered, casting dancing shadows that made the tent feel both brighter and darker at once. It certainly added a mysterious atmosphere, I'll give her that. I sat down quietly, my eye scanning the tarot cards laid out on the table. I spotted familiar figures: the magician, the emperor, the hanged man, temperance. Could Roselle have been at senior? I wonder if he was also a fellow countryman of mine. The thought surfaced subconsciously. Before I could get a good look at all the cards, the woman who claimed to have such accurate divination swept them all up. She stacked them into a neat deck and pushed it across the table toward me. Shuffle the cards first and cut the deck, she said, her voice muted and low. Me? Shuffle? I asked, a little surprised. The paint on her face seemed to squirm as she offered a slight smile. Of course. Everyone's destiny can only be unraveled by themselves. I only serve as a reader of it. My guard went up immediately. This reading does not require additional fees, right? As a keyboard folklorist, I've seen far too many tricks like this. The fortune-teller was visibly taken aback. It's free, she finally said, her voice muffled. I felt a wave of relief and subtly pushed the revolver deeper into my pocket. Feeling more secure, I calmly reached out, shuffling and cutting the deck with a practiced skill I hadn't used in years. It's done. I placed the tarot cards back in the middle of the table. She clasped the deck with both hands, studying it for a moment. Then, she suddenly looked up. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask, but what would you like to ask about? I'd done a bit of research on tarot back when I was trying to woo my first love. Past, present, and future, I answered without hesitation. It was a classic spread, 3 cards, each symbolizing a different point in time. She nodded, then a smile curled her lips. Then please reshuffle the deck. You can only truly get the cards you want if you know what you would like to ask about. Were you fooling me just now? Do you have to be this petty? All because I questioned if the service was free? The muscles in my cheek twitched. I took a deep breath, pulled the deck back, and went through the motions of shuffling and cutting it all over again. There won't be any problems this time, right? I asked, placing the deck back on the table. No problem. Her fingers deftly plucked the top card from the deck and placed it to my left. Her voice dropped lower. This card symbolizes your past. She drew a second card, placing it directly in front of me. This card symbolizes your present. Then she took a third, setting it to my right. This card symbolizes the future. All right, which card would you like to see first? The fortune teller lifted her head, her greyish-blue eyes gazing at me with a strange intensity. "I'll have a look at the present first," I decided after a moment's thought. She nodded slowly and flipped over the card in the center. On it was a colourfully dressed character in ragged headgear, a stick slung over his shoulder with a bindle tied to the end. A small puppy followed at his heels. The number at the top was 0. The Fool. The fortune teller read the name of the card softly, her gaze fixed on me. The Fool? The 0th card? A start? A fresh beginning with all kinds of possibilities? I was no expert, just an amateur enthusiast at best, so my interpretation was based on vague impressions. Just as she was about to speak, the tent flap was yanked open. A ray of sunlight stabbed into the darkness, so blinding that I instinctively narrowed my eyes. "Why are you impersonating me again?" a woman's voice growled. "It's my job to handle the divination for people. Return to your post quickly. You must remember that you're just an animal trainer." An animal trainer? My eyes had adjusted to the light now. I saw another woman, almost identical to the first, pointy hat, black dress, red and yellow face paint. This one was just taller and slimmer. The woman sitting across from me shot to her feet, disgruntled. "Don't mind this, it's just that I like doing this. But I have to say, my divination and interpretation can be really accurate sometimes. I'm serious." She lifted her dress, scurried around the table, and trotted out of the tent. "Sir, would you like me to interpret your cards for you?" the real fortune teller asked, looking at me with a smile. My lips twitched. I asked her with all the sincerity I could muster, "Is it free?" "No," she answered. "Then forget it." I pulled my hands back, shoving them into my pockets to clutch the reassuring weight of my revolver and my money. I stooped down and exited the tent. Damn! I actually got an animal trainer to be my fortune teller. Was an animal trainer who didn't want to be a fortune teller not a good clown? I put the matter behind me quickly. At the lettuce and meat market, I spent 7 pence on a pound of not-so-great mutton, along with some tender broad beans, cabbage, onions, and potatoes. With the bread I'd bought earlier, my total came to 2 soldi and 1 pence. 25 copper pennies gone just like that. There is really not enough to go around for spending. Poor Benson. I had spent the 2 notes I brought and had to top it up with the 1 penny already in my pocket. I sighed, but didn't dwell on it as I hurried home. With the staple food acquired, I could finally carry out the luck enhancement ritual. Even after the second-floor tenants had left for the day, I didn't rush. I sat at my desk and meticulously translated blessing stem from the immortal Lord of Heaven and Earth and its variations into the ancient facade language, and then into the Lun language. It was a scientific approach. If the original incantation failed, I'd try the local versions tomorrow. In Rome, do as the Romans do. Translating it into the formal, Hermes language used for ancient rituals proved difficult with my limited vocabulary. Once everything was ready, I took out the 4 loaves of rye bread. I placed one in the corner where the coal stove used to be, another at the base of the full-length mirror, a third at the top of the cupboard where 2 walls met, and the last on the right side of my cluttered study table. Taking a deep breath, I moved to the center of the room. I spent a few minutes calming my racing heart, then took a solemn step forward, beginning a counterclockwise walk in the shape of a square. With the first step, I chanted in a low whisper, "Blessings stem from the immortal Lord of Heaven and Earth." With the second step, my voice was sincere. "Blessings stem from the Sky Lord of Heaven and Earth." With the third step, I breathed out the words, "Blessings stem from the exalted Arch of Heaven and Earth." With the fourth step, I spat out a foul breath and focused my mind. "Blessings stem from the celestial worthy of heaven and earth." Returning to my starting point, I closed my eyes and waited. Anticipation, unease, hope, and fear churned within me. Could I make it back? Would there be any effect? Could something unexpected happen? The unknown was a crimson light of hope before me, and my thoughts swirled, impossible to quell. That's when I felt it. The air in the room seemed to stop moving, growing thick and mysterious. Immediately after, a low whisper began beside my ear. It was sometimes real, sometimes sharp, sometimes imaginary, sometimes alluring, sometimes maniacal, sometimes crazy. I couldn't understand the murmuring, but some part of me desperately wanted to listen, to distinguish the words. My head began to throb. The pain intensified until it felt like someone had jammed a steel drill rod into my skull and was twisting it. My head was going to explode. My thoughts fractured into a psychedelic mess of colors. I knew something was horribly wrong. I tried to open my eyes, a simple action that was now impossible. My whole body grew tighter and tighter, stretched to the breaking point. A single, self-mocking thought cut through the agony: if you didn't seek death, you wouldn't die. I couldn't bear it anymore. Just as my mind was about to shatter, the murmuring faded away. The surroundings became quiet, but the atmosphere was erratic, unstable. I felt my body become just as unstable. This time, when I tried to open my eyes, it was effortless. A grey fog filled my vision, hazy, vague, endless. What's with this situation? I looked around wildly, then down at myself. I was floating at the edge of this boundless fog. The mist flowed like water, and dotted throughout it were crimson stars. Some were enormous, some tiny, some seemed to lurk in the deep, others floated near the surface. Staring at the holographic sight, I was half confused, half exploratory. I reached out my right hand, intending to touch the nearest crimson star, hoping to find a way to leave this place. The moment my fingers made contact, the star erupted in a crimson burst, like a dreamlike, burning flame. I snatched my hand back in a panic, but in my haste, I accidentally brushed against another crimson star. It, too, burst into splendid light. In that instant, my mind went empty, and my spirit dissipated. When my sight returned, I was still in the fog of grey mist. Terrified and confused, I tried to make sense of my surroundings and noticed a blurry female figure on the opposite side, looking just as lost as I was. Immediately after, we both saw another mysterious person standing not far from us, shrouded in the same grey mist. That mysterious person was, of course, me. I was just as dumbfounded as they were. A moment of startled silence, and then two voices spoke in perfect unison with my own. "Sir, where is this? What are you planning on doing?" They spoke in the Lun language, their tones identical in their grim, tense quality. "Where am I? What do I plan to do here? I'd very much like to know that myself." I calmly repeated their questions in my mind, a silent echo in the fog. But what struck me more than their words was the raw emotion behind them: bewilderment, vigilance, panic, and reverence. Two people, dragged into this grey world for no reason I could fathom. As the apparent perpetrator, I was already feeling dumbfounded and startled. I can only imagine what it must be like for them, pulled into this mess completely passively. An encounter like this had to be beyond their wildest imaginations. In a fraction of a second, two options flashed through my mind. First, I could feign victimhood, pretend I was just as confused as they were. It might gain me their trust, and I could play the long game, waiting to see how things developed. The second option was to embrace the mystery they saw in me. Maintain this enigmatic persona, influence what happens next, and try to glean some valuable information. There was no time to deliberate. I seized the second idea. Exploit their psychological state to gain the greatest advantage for myself. After a few seconds of charged silence, I let out a low chuckle. My tone was calm, neither heavy nor light, as if I were merely replying to a polite greeting from a visitor. An attempt. An attempt, an attempt. I saw the girl recoil slightly, her confusion almost palpable even through the mist. The thoughts practically screamed across the space between us: absurd, funny, horrifying, weird. I couldn't blame her. One moment she was in her bedroom, the next she was here. It was inconceivable to me, too. She took a breath, and I could just make out the shape of an impeccable, courteous smile. Her voice, though, was perturbed. "Sir, is the attempt over? Might you permit our return?" The man beside her, I noted, had similar intentions but was more composed. His rich experience, I could sense it in his stillness, made him hold back, content to be a silent onlooker. I looked at the girl. Through the haze, I could only see a silhouette, tall, with what looked like smooth blonde hair. Her face was a blur. I turned my gaze to the man. Messy, dark blue hair, a medium build, not particularly stout. A sudden thought occurred to me: if I grew stronger, or understood this foggy world better, perhaps I could see them clearly. In this place, they are the visitors, and I am the master. With that shift in mindset, details I'd previously missed snapped into focus. The girl with the melodious voice and the mature, withdrawn man both looked incorporeal. They were tinged with a faint crimson red, like projections cast from two of those crimson stars I'd seen floating in the fog. The projection was based on some intangible connection between them and me, a connection only I could grasp. If I cut that connection, the projection would disappear. They would return. I nodded mildly, my confidence bolstered by this newfound understanding. I looked at the blonde girl and chuckled. Of course. If you make a formal request, you can return this very moment. She seemed to relax, hearing no ill intent in my voice. She clearly believed a gentleman capable of such miracles would be true to his word. With her mind somewhat at ease, she surprisingly didn't ask to leave. Her eyes, which I imagined to be a vibrant green, seemed to dart around, sparkling with a strange light. Her voice was a mixture of anxiety, anticipation, and temptation. This is such a wonderful experience. Yes, I have always been hoping that something like this would happen. I mean, I like mysteries and supernatural miracles. No, my point is, what I mean is that, sir, what can I do to become a beyonder? She grew more excited as she spoke, stumbling over her words, all her previous fear seemingly forgotten. Good question. I would also like to know the answer. I complained inwardly, my mind racing to come up with a response that would maintain my unfathomable image. Standing here and talking felt unbecoming. Shouldn't I be in a palace of some kind? Sitting at the head of a long, imposing table, on a mysterious high-backed chair carved with ancient patterns, silently observing my visitors. The instant the thought formed, the grey fog around us began to churn violently. Both of them jumped in shock. Towering stone pillars erupted from the mist, soaring upwards to support a vast, domed ceiling that encapsulated us. The entire edifice was magnificent, grand, and lofty, like a palace built for giants. Directly beneath the dome, where the fog was thickest, a long, bronze table materialized, flanked on either side by 10 high-backed chairs. The back of each chair glowed with a faint crimson light, outlining strange constellations that didn't exist in the real world. The girl and the man found themselves seated opposite each other, near the head of the table where I now stood. She looked around, her voice a hushed whisper. How fascinating. It certainly is. I thought, extending a hand to caress the cool, solid edge of the bronze table while keeping my expression completely unperturbed. The man inspected our new surroundings, and after a few seconds of silence, he spoke, answering the girl's question in my stead. Are you a Lun? If you want to become a beyonder, join the churches of either the Evernite goddess, the Lord of Storms, or the god of steam and machinery. He continued, his voice low and steady, beyonders still exist. They are still fighting against the dangers that grow in the dark, only that their numbers are much fewer. I listened attentively, but I made sure my posture was relaxed, my expression one of faint, detached interest, like a professor listening to a child recite a simple story. Inside, I was frantically absorbing every word. Nighthawks, mandated punisher, machinery hive mind. Relying on Klein's fragmented memories, I knew the Iron Age he mentioned was the current era, the fifth epoch. This was invaluable intelligence. The girl, Audrey, sighed. Mister, I know all about what you just said, but I don't want to lose my freedom. The man, Alger, gave a low laugh. You can't become a beyonder without sacrifices. If not the churches, you can seek the royal families, or rely on your luck to search for clandestine evil organizations. Audrey's cheeks puffed out for a moment before she caught herself. Are there no other solutions? Alger fell silent. After a long half-minute, he glanced towards me, as if seeking permission. Seeing I had no intention of speaking, he turned back to her. I have 2 sets of Sequence 9 potion formulas. Sequence 9? Potion formulas? I committed the turns to memory. Really? Which 2 sets? Audrey clearly knew what that meant. I have a Sequence 9 potion named Sailor, Alger explained. It enables you to have excellent balancing capabilities, and gain immense strength. He then described a second, Spectator. This set of potions enables you to have an exceptionally sharp mind with acute observational abilities. Just like an audience, spectators judge the actors in the secular world, catching a glimpse of the real thoughts of them through their emotions, conduct, and mantras. He added a warning: spectators can only be spectators forever. Audrey's eyes shone. I think I have fallen in love with this feeling of being a spectator. How can I get this potion's formula? The blood of ghost sharks, Alger said, his voice deep. At least 100 milliliters of it. Their discussion turned to logistics, how to trade, how to ensure authenticity. Then, Alger played his trump card. As for promises, I think that both you and I can feel rest assured under the witness of the mysterious Sir. He looked directly at me. Sir, the fact that you brought us here shows that you have tremendous strength unimaginable to us. Neither one of us would dare violate a promise with you as witness. That's right. Audrey agreed, turning to me earnestly. Sir, please be the witness of our trade. Then she seemed to realize her impoliteness. Sir, how should we address you? Alger echoed the question seriously. Sir, how should we address you? I was taken aback. My fingers rapped gently on the bronze table. The image from the earlier divination flashed through my mind. The card. The name. I leaned back in the magnificent chair that had appeared at the head of the table, withdrawing my right hand and crossing my fingers, placing them just below my chin. I gave them a faint, unreadable smile. You can address me as? I paused for dramatic effect, my voice amiable and calm. The Fool. The name echoed in the grand hall before dissipating into the fog, yet it seemed to resonate in their minds. I could see it in their stillness. They were shocked, but they also felt it was fitting. Mysterious, powerful, bizarre. It worked. Honorable Mr. Fool, Audrey said, standing and curtsying, would you please permit me to take the liberty of requesting you to be the witness of our trade? It's nothing, I replied, my mind whirring to find words that matched my new status. They continued their arrangements, settling on a bar in Pritz Harbor for the drop-off and agreeing to complete the formula exchange here, in my presence. This confirmed they expected another gathering. Audrey, emboldened, turned to me with sparkling eyes. Mr. Fool, would you mind making a few more attempts like this? Alger quickly seconded the motion. Mr. Fool, don't you find such gatherings interesting? Perhaps there will come a day when both of us can help you complete something trivial that might be inconvenient for you. A smart man. He understood that his participation wasn't exactly optional, so he was trying to maximize the benefits. He was right, a network of people with different resources and information could be incredibly useful. More gatherings meant more information, a potential boon for figuring out how to get back home. Or, at the very least, how to survive here. But it also meant a higher chance of exposing myself, of them realizing I was just as clueless as they were. Still, since I seemed to control when and how we met, the risk was manageable. The pros outweighed the cons. I stopped rapping my fingers on the table and smiled at their expectant faces. I'm a person who likes a fair and equal exchange, I said, my voice resonating slightly in the vast space. Your help will not go unrewarded. Every Monday at 3 in the afternoon, try your best to be alone. Audrey couldn't help but pump her fist in silent celebration. Then, shall we give ourselves call signs, she suggested excitedly. You are Mr. Fool, which is derived from tarot cards. I'll choose one from the tarot cards too. My designation shall be Justice. She turned to her partner. What about you, Mr.? Alger's brow furrowed for a moment before smoothing out. The Hanged Man. All right, then we can be considered as the founding members of the Tarot Club. Audrey blurted out, then looked at me fearfully. Will that be all right, Mr. Fool? I gave an amused shake of my head. You can decide on such trivial matters by yourselves. They spoke a little more about the nature of divination and the legend of Emperor Razel creating a secret set of 22 cards that held the mysteries of the divine paths. I listened while feigning indifference, but my headache was returning, a throbbing pain that signaled my connection to this place was faltering. All right, that will be all for today's gathering, I announced, my voice deep and final. By your will, they both said, bowing their heads respectfully. As I severed the connection, I offered one last smile. Let us look forward to the next gathering. The crimson light in their forms receded like a tide, and their figures blurred and phased away. In a second, they were gone, and the silent grey fog reclaimed the grand hall. My body suddenly felt heavy, the world around me turned fleeting, and my eyes met darkness before being assaulted by the dazzling sunlight of my apartment. I was standing in the middle of the room. It was like a dream. I sighed, my legs feeling as though they were filled with lead as I stumbled to my desk. I picked up my pocket watch. Time flowed at the same pace. I put the watch down, no longer able to endure the splitting headache. I sank into my chair, massaging my temples. After a long while, I let out another sigh, this time in my native Mandarin. From the looks of it, I won't be able to return any time soon. Having witnessed such a thing, having learned of Beyonders and potions, I no longer dared to rashly try that luck enhancement ritual again. Who knew what horrors I might summon next time? At least I have the gathering to help me learn. After another long silence, I muttered to myself, a storm of dismay, disappointment, and grief in my voice. From this moment forth, I'm Klein. I had to be. I tried to focus, to reorient myself. This gathering, people from different places, meeting face to face across hundreds of kilometers to trade resources. It sounded familiar. I was stunned for a few seconds, then a dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. I pressed a hand to my temple, a jesting whisper under my breath. Wasn't that a social networking platform?
Meanwhile, the story continues from Alger Wilson's perspective.
The wind howled, a familiar song of the sea's fury. Rain lashed down in sheets, and the deck of this three-masted relic pitched and yawed beneath my feet. One moment the sky, the next a trough between mountains of black water. The sea has always been a giant toying with its victims. Then, the crimson glow that had filled my vision vanished. I was back. The salt spray on my face was real, the cold seeping into my bones was real. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. In my palm, the strange glass bottle, the price of my entry, cracked and fell apart. The frost inside turned to water and was lost in the deluge, gone as if it had never been. A transaction completed. As proof, a perfect, hexagonal snowflake of crystal bloomed on my skin before fading, sinking into my flesh like a brand. I nodded, a motion so small the storm would have hidden it from any observer. The power I had just witnessed. The fool, it required consideration. For a full 5 minutes, I stood there, letting the gale whip around me, calculating the risks, the potential gains. This was a secret that could change my trajectory entirely. Time to finish the business at hand. I turned and made for the cabin. Just as I reached the door, it opened. A man in the same lightning-embroidered robes as my own emerged, his soft blonde hair a stark contrast to the violence of the storm and our shared faith. He paused. He held his right fist to his chest. "May the storm be with you." I returned the gesture, my own fist thudding against my ribs. "May the storm be with you." I kept my face a mask of stone, betraying nothing of the monumental secret now sealed within me. He passed, and I entered the corridor, heading for the captain's cabin at the far end. The silence was absolute. No creak of a sailor's boots, no murmur of a watchman. A graveyard, but one I was familiar with. I pushed open the captain's door. A soft brown carpet, a flickering candle on a desk. Bookshelves and a wine rack lined the walls, their contents looking ancient and out of place. Behind the desk sat my target, a pale man in a captain's hat, a ridiculous skull grinning from its front. As I stepped forward, his eyes, wide with fear, settled on me. He tried to sound menacing. "I will not give in." His defiance was pathetic. "I believe you can do it," I said, my voice as calm as the eye of the storm. The words confused him. It was all the opening I needed. I closed the distance in a heartbeat, my body leaning forward in a predator's dash. My right hand shot out, clamping around his throat before he could draw another breath. Illusory fish scales shimmered into existence on the back of my hand as I channeled my power, my grip tightening with inhuman strength. I gave him no time to react, no time to beg. Crack. The sound was satisfyingly crisp. His eyes bulged as I lifted him clean out of his chair. His legs kicked for a moment, then went still. The fight drained out of him, his pupils dilating into black pools of nothing. A foul stench filled the air as his bladder let go. Still holding him, I pivoted and strode to the wall. Using his dead weight as a battering ram, I smashed him against the wooden planks. The wall splintered, bursting outward in a shower of rotten wood. Rain and the scent of the ocean flooded the small cabin. With a grunt, I flung the corpse through the opening, a worthless offering to the waves. The sea took him without a sound, a mountain of water crashing down, erasing him from existence. I pulled a white handkerchief from my pocket, meticulously wiping my right hand before tossing the cloth out into the tempest after him. The primary task was done. Now for the performance. I stepped back from the hole and waited. It took less than 10 seconds. My blonde-haired associate rushed in, his face a mask of alarm. What happened? I let out a ragged breath, forcing a pant. The captain has escaped, I said, injecting a healthy dose of annoyance into my voice. I didn't know he still had some of his beyonder powers. Damn it, he cursed, just as I knew he would. He moved to the opening I'd made, peering out into the maelstrom. There was nothing to see but the chaos of the ocean. Predictable. Forget it, he was just extra loot, he said, waving a dismissive hand. A keeper of the sea he might be, but he wasn't fool enough to dive into this. We will still be rewarded for finding this ghost ship from the Tudor era. The captain will not be able to survive much longer if the storm continues, I said, nodding in agreement. As I spoke, the hole in the wooden wall began to knit itself back together, the splinters writhing and joining until the planks were whole once more. My gaze drifted past the repairing wall, toward the helm and the masts. I knew what lay behind the wood. Nothing. No chief mate, no sailors, no living soul. Just a rudder that turned on its own and sails that trimmed themselves against the wind. An eerie, but useful, vessel. The image of the fool, shrouded in that impenetrable grayish-white fog, rose in my mind. The power to pull me into such a place, the sheer mystery of it all. I let out a slow sigh. This ghost ship was a marvel of the supernatural, but it was nothing compared to what I had just touched. I turned back to the raging sea, to the almighty power of nature devouring everything in its path. But even this felt small now. Awe, anticipation, and a grim sense of opportunity churned within me. A new era has begun, I murmured, the words almost stolen by the wind.
Meanwhile, the story continues from Audrey Hall's perspective.
I had to pinch my cheek. It was the only way to be sure. The slight sting of it was real, grounding me in my bedroom, here in the heart of Empress Borough. On the polished surface of my dressing table, the antique bronze mirror lay in 1,000 glittering pieces. It was real, too. A confirmation. I slowly lowered my gaze to the back of my hand, where a swirling crimson star, intricate as a tattoo, was gently fading, sinking back into my skin until it was gone. It wasn't a dream. A grin stretched across my face, an irrepressible, unladylike thing. I couldn't help it. My eyes twinkled at my reflection in the intact vanity mirror. I pushed back from my seat, a giddy energy bubbling up inside me. Bending down, I gathered the hem of my morning dress, curtsied to the empty, sunlit room, and began to dance. It was the ancient elf dance, the latest craze among the nobility, but right now, it felt like my own secret celebration. I spun and stepped, my smile bright and my movements filled with a grace born of pure, unadulterated joy. A secret world had just opened up to me. Knock. Knock. I froze mid-twirl. Who is it? I called out, my voice a little breathless. I quickly smoothed my dress, composing my features. The wide, joyous grin had to be placated, soothed into the gentle, pleasant smile expected of Audrey Hall. My lady, may I come in? You should start to prepare for the ceremony, my maidservant's voice came from the hallway. A quick glance in the mirror confirmed my mask was in place. Come in, I replied softly. The doorknob turned, and Annie entered, her eyes immediately falling upon the glittering mess on my dressing table. Oh, it cracked. She murmured, her brows furrowing in concern. I blinked, feigning a moment of surprise before letting out a little sigh. Yes. Susie was here just now. I am sure you know she likes to wreak havoc. It was a plausible lie. Susie, my darling golden retriever, was known for her boisterous affection, though never for breaking mirrors. Still, it was a much better explanation than a mystical gathering in a palace above the grey fog. You should train it well, Annie chided gently. She was already deftly gathering the larger pieces, her movements careful and practiced. Once the last shard was cleared away, she turned back to me, her professional smile restored. Which dress do you want to put on? I like the dress designed by Mrs. Guinea for my 17th birthday, I mused, already knowing the answer. No, Annie said, shaking her head firmly. You can't wear the same dress twice to a formal ceremony, or others will gossip about and question the whole family's financial ability. But I really like it. I insisted, keeping my tone sweet, and just a little wistful. You can wear it at home, or when you attend an event that isn't so formal, she countered, her stance unyielding. She was, as always, correct. I drew in a tiny, inconspicuous breath. Then it will have to be the one with the lotus design along the sleeves given by Mr. Sades 2 days ago. You always have such a good taste, Annie beamed, before turning to call for the other servants. The 6th dressing room. Ah, forget it, I shall fetch it myself. Soon the room was a whirlwind of activity, dresses, accessories, shoes, hats, makeup, and hair. As the final touches were being applied, Father appeared at my open door, looking quite distinguished in his dark brown waistcoat. He knocked twice lightly on the door frame. The brightest jewel of Backland, it is time for our departure. Father. Stop calling me that, I protested, rising with the assistance of my maids. He simply smiled, the gesture crinkling the corners of his kind blue eyes. Well then, it's time to set off, my beautiful little princess. He bent his left arm, offering it to me. I shook my head gently. That is for my mother, Mrs. Hall, the Countess. He chuckled, switching arms without missing a beat. Then this side. This is for you, my greatest pride. When I took Father's arm and stepped down from the carriage at the Royal Navy base in Pritz Harbour, the sheer scale of what lay before me took my breath away. There, shimmering in the port, was a juggernaut of metal. It had no sails, only a towering observatory deck, 2 massive chimneys already trickling smoke, and 2 monstrous gun turrets, one at the bow and one at the stern. It was so immense, so powerful, that the elegant sailing ships nearby looked like toys. Whispers erupted all around me. Holy Lord of Storms! An ironclad warship! It truly was a miracle of the modern age, an astonishing feat of human creation. Just as the assembled aristocrats began to compose themselves, a black spot grew in the sky, resolving itself into a gigantic flying machine. It hovered with a deep, humming thrum, a beautiful and terrifying deep blue airship. Sunlight glinted off the muzzles of machine guns and cannons mounted beneath its alloy frame. The king's family had arrived. Being not yet 18, my formal debut into society was still some months away. It meant I had to remain near the back of the crowd, a silent observer. I was actually quite relieved. It saved me the trouble of having to make conversation with the princes. The airship descended gracefully. Guards in brilliant red and white ceremonial uniforms formed 2 lines, rifles at the ready. Then King George III appeared, flanked by his queen and children. But my eyes were drawn to the 2 figures beside them, cavalrymen encased from head to toe in black steel armor. Even in this new age of steam and iron, they looked impossibly formidable, their cold, metallic presence radiating authority. Could they be the higher-order disciplinary paladins? I wondered, recalling fragments of conversations I wasn't meant to have heard. The ceremony began. The Prime Minister, Lord Agezid-Negan, a slender man with a sharp gaze, stepped forward to speak. He listed the warship's incredible specifications: over 100 meters long, armor nearly half a meter thick, cannons that could fire shells weighing hundreds of pounds. He called it the hegemon that would conquer the seas. Your Majesty, please give it a name, he requested. King George III, looking immensely pleased, declared, since it will set sail from Pritz Harbour, it should be named the Pritz. A cheer went up, echoing across the water as sailors aboard the great ship roared the name in unison. On the king's order, the Pritz began to move, its horn blasting as thick smoke poured from its chimneys. Then, the main cannons fired at a distant, uninhabited island. The ground shook, and the sound was like the wrath of the storm god himself. It was terrifying, and absolutely magnificent. Lord Agezid turned back to us, his voice ringing with triumph. From this day on, doomsday will fall on the 7 pirates, who call themselves admirals, and the 4 who call themselves kings. The era of cannons and warships has dawned upon us. An era of cannons and warships. It felt so solid. So real. And yet, just a short while ago, I was in a secret gathering, a spectator to a different kind of power. Mr. Hanged Man had spoken of his own new era. Here, men celebrate a ship of steel and steam. There, he spoke of beyonder powers and ghost ships. It's all so thrilling, living in these 2 worlds at once. But as I stand here, surrounded by the greatest powers in the Lun Kingdom, watching this marvel of engineering, a single thought keeps circling in my mind. Amidst all this pomp and steel, how on earth am I supposed to find the blood of a ghost shark?
The Fool's Paradox, Entrapment by Escape. The episode masterfully inverts the protagonist's quest for escape by establishing a central paradox. His desperate ritual to return home becomes the very catalyst that enmeshes him deeper into the world's mysteries, forcing him to construct a powerful, false persona as his only tool for survival and understanding. This profound irony is crystallized in the luck-enhancement ritual, an act intended as a lifeline that instead becomes a tether. With a mix of hope and fear, he chants ancient words, seeking a passage back to his own time. Yet, the ritual succeeds in a way he never imagined, not by returning him home, but by casting him into a liminal space of grey fog and crimson stars. The chaotic whispers and blinding pain that accompany this transition are not the pangs of rebirth into a new life, but the agonizing birth of a new entanglement. By accidentally pulling 2 strangers into this space with him, the ritual transforms from a personal plea for escape into an inescapable, shared reality, proving itself to be a mechanism of deeper entrapment, not liberation. Faced with this incomprehensible situation, Klein's split-second decision to perform a role rather than reveal his vulnerability demonstrates that constructing a facade is his only immediate survival strategy. When confronted by 2 strangers who see him as a powerful, mysterious entity, he instinctively seizes upon the second of his 2 mental options, to embrace the mystery they saw in me. His calm, enigmatic response and attempt is a masterful piece of improvisation, a shield forged in the fires of panic. This choice is cemented by the prophetic, albeit farcical, tarot reading from earlier, where an imposter diviner draws the Fool. This card, representing a new beginning filled with unknown potential, becomes the blueprint for his new identity. He is a fool in the truest sense, clueless and terrified, but by adopting Mr. Fool as his moniker, he transforms his ignorance into an aura of unfathomable power, making his performance the only barrier between his fragile psyche and the terrifying unknowns of his new existence. This newly constructed persona immediately solidifies his entanglement in the world, transforming his solitary quest for escape into a collaborative quest for knowledge. The establishment of the Tarot Club is not a conscious choice but a consequence of his performance. By appearing powerful, he is treated as such, and a secret society forms around him. The members, Justice and the Hanged Man, look to him as a witness and arbiter, immediately establishing a network that offers him the very information he needs to survive, and perhaps one day, return home. This exchange of potion formulas for ghost shark blood cements the club's function and Klein's role within it. His initial desire to flee is now subsumed by the necessity to learn, and the only path to learning is through the persona he has created. Thus, the act of pretending to be a god becomes the only way for the man to survive, forever binding his fate to the very world he sought to escape.